In 1788, Britain began sending prisoners to Australia to ease overcrowded jails and establish a colony on the continent. Many of these convicts were charged with minor crimes and, after serving their sentences, started new lives in Australia. However, the more troublesome convicts were sent to isolated, harsh prison colonies, including Sarah Island in Tasmania, one of the most brutal places of its time. Life on Sarah Island was a nightmare. Prisoners faced freezing weather, starvation, backbreaking labor, and severe punishments. It was so horrific that many attempted to escape, but surviving the wild Tasmanian wilderness was nearly impossible. Dense forests, dangerous animals, and the unforgiving landscape awaited them. But the tale of Alexander Pearce, a prisoner who escaped from Sarah Island, takes a darker turn. His story involves betrayal, survival, and cannibalism. Viewer discretion is advised as we uncover one of the most disturbing tales in Australia's history. Before we dive into the topic, don't forget to subscribe to Crime Unsolved for more incredible stories from history. Alexander Pearce was born in Ireland and seemed destined for trouble. In 1819, he was caught stealing 6 pairs of shoes and sentenced to transportation to Australia for 7 years. This was not likely his first crime, as minor offenders were usually not sent overseas. After months on a cramped prison ship, Pearce arrived in Tasmania, then called Van Diemen's Land, and was assigned work as a farm laborer. For a short time, Pearce had relative freedom, but his behavior quickly became a problem. Within 9 months, he landed in a chain gang for causing trouble. He was given more chances, but couldn't stay out of trouble. His repeated offenses, including theft and escape attempts, led to harsher punishments each time. By 1822, his actions had caught up with him, and he was sent to Sarah Island, the harshest prison in the region. Sarah Island was a place of despair, located in a remote bay surrounded by mountains, thick forests, and wild rivers. The prison was nearly inescapable. To the west lay the open ocean, and to the east was a dangerous wilderness. The weather was cold and rainy, and food was scarce. For those who misbehaved, punishments were severe. Repeat offenders were flogged with a brutal whip called the double cat-o'-nine-tails. This whip caused deep wounds, broken bones, and internal injuries. To make it worse, wounds were cleaned with salt water, causing unbearable pain. Some prisoners were punished by being left on cold, rocky outcroppings overnight, with no shelter from the freezing winds. The conditions on Sarah Island broke even the strongest of men. The combination of starvation, brutal punishments, and constant fear left prisoners desperate. Many dreamed of escaping, but few dared to try. For Alexander Pearce, the horrors of Sarah Island became too much to bear. After just 1 month, he decided to escape, despite the odds stacked against him. On September 20th, 1822, Pearce and 7 other prisoners were sent to cut timber on the mainland. This job provided the perfect opportunity to escape. The group was led by Robert Greenhill and Matthew Travers, who had planned the escape. Each man carried an axe for cutting wood, which soon became their weapon for survival. As the group reached the mainland, they overpowered their guards, stole supplies, and vanished into the wilderness. Their plan was to make it across the rugged terrain to freedom, but the harsh environment quickly turned their escape into a fight for survival. The initial excitement of freedom gave way to grim reality. The men faced freezing rain, thick forests, and a complete lack of food. They had no knowledge of the land and no tools to hunt or gather. Hunger quickly became their greatest enemy. The first few days were grueling. The men trudged through dense forests, crossing freezing rivers and battling heavy rain. Food ran out quickly and hunger took over. With no animals or plants to eat, desperation set in. On the 5th day, the group made a horrifying decision. They would sacrifice one of their own to survive. Thomas Bodenham was chosen, allegedly by drawing straws. According to Pearce's confession, Bodenham prayed for forgiveness before Robert Greenhill struck him with an axe. The group cooked and ate his remains, a grim act that gave them the strength to continue. But this was just the beginning. Over the following weeks, more members of the group were killed and eaten as food ran out again and again. Trust among the prisoners eroded and paranoia set in. Pearce's accounts describe betrayal and violence as the men turned on each other. Paranoia grew as the group dwindled. Each man feared he would be the next victim. Arguments broke out and alliances shifted. The wilderness became not just a physical challenge, but a psychological battle as well. Pearce later described the haunting feeling of being hunted by his own companions, even as he hunted them in return. The group's journey through the wilderness revealed just how unprepared they were. Rivers were impassable, and the terrain was treacherous. Days turned into weeks, and their desperation grew. Some members tried to flee the group, only to be caught or killed. The wilderness offered no mercy, and survival came at a horrifying cost. Eventually, only Pearce and Greenhill remained. By this point, Pearce feared for his life. One night, while Greenhill slept, Pearce took the axe and killed him. Alone in the wilderness, Pearce continued his journey. After nearly 49 days of wandering, he stumbled upon a farm. The farmer who recognized Pearce helped him recover. But instead of keeping a low profile, Pearce returned to a life of petty crime. He was soon captured and sent back to Sarah Island. Pearce's survival was nothing short of miraculous, but the darkness of his journey stayed with him. His physical appearance, thin, gaunt, and wild-eyed, was a reflection of the horrors he had endured. Yet despite the opportunity to start over, Pearce's criminal tendencies led him back to prison. A year later, Pearce attempted another escape, this time with a fellow prisoner named Thomas Cox. The two fled into the wilderness, but Pearce's habits resurfaced. After an argument, Pearce killed and ate Cox. This act led to his capture once again. Pearce confessed to his crimes, including cannibalism, and was sentenced to death. On July 19, 1824, he was hanged. His skull was later sent to a museum, where it remains today. Before his execution, Pearce's confession shocked the community. Some believed his tales of cannibalism were exaggerated, while others saw them as proof of the extreme conditions faced by convicts. Either way, his story became infamous, a grim reminder of the desperation bred by the harsh Australian penal system. Alexander Pearce's story raises unsettling questions. Was he a man driven to unimaginable acts by desperation, or was there something darker within him? His confessions varied, with some accounts blaming others for the killings and others portraying him as the instigator. The truth may never be fully known. What do you think? Was Pearce a victim of circumstance, or did his true nature emerge in the wilderness? Share your thoughts and let us know what you would have done in his place. Pearce's story also serves as a reflection of the brutal penal system of the time. The transportation of convicts to Australia was meant to reform them, but for many it became a descent into madness. The isolation, harsh conditions, and lack of hope created an environment where survival came at any cost. If you liked the video, don't forget to like and subscribe the channel.